For hundreds of years, Korea has been a battleground for competing nations and ideas. The last century, the darkest in the peninsula's history, has seen it divided as never before. It began with Russia and Japan fighting for control. Japan used victory to annex Korea in 1910, having already installed a puppet leader. Sun Jong was the last Korean emperor. By the time he died, the Japanese were completely in control and attempting to undermine Korean identity. With Japan defeated in World War II, Korea fell victim to the Cold War. It was divided into two spheres of influence along the 38th parallel. The Americans controlled south of the line, the Russians installed a communist regime in the north.
The separation around the 38th parallel between North and South and the spheres of influence and the Cold War obviously had a huge impact on the way the two countries sort of like set on a different course.
Before an avalanche of Chinese manpower sweeping down below the 38th parallel.
In 1950, the North, now backed by China, launched a surprise attack.
Those in favour will please raise their hands.
The UN supported what it called a police action to repulse the advance. The Korean War had begun.
A strongly equipped force of seasoned troops prepared to take off by transport plane for the Far East.
Most troops on the UN side were American, but 90,000 British soldiers were involved fighting the Chinese Red Army. More than 1,000 were killed, many of them conscripts. By the time an armistice was signed in 1953, 2.5 million people had died. The line of division remained where it started, the 38th parallel. After the war, South Korea's economy prospered under a capitalist dictatorship, eventually becoming a democracy. North Korea remains an economic basket case, a police state ruled by the same family for 3 generations. First Kim Il-sung, then his son Kim Jong-il, now the grandson Kim Jong-un. The legacy of that dark century leaves 2 countries, one defended by China, the other by the USA, each glowering at the other across an artificial divide.
North Korea is a bit of a black box, right? It's got this rogue nuclear program. It's under heavy international sanctions. There's gulags, there's famines. The people appear to worship this deified kid of a national leader. To understand why that is, you really have to go back to 1910, when Japan first colonized Korea. And Japan at the time was its own super crazy fascist imperial state, which Americans know all about because we fought a war with them. Japan wanted to convince Koreans that they were a subset of the Japanese race and to rally them to the imperial cause. And then Japan collapsed in 1945, the North came under Soviet occupation, but the ideology stayed there. So we think of North Korea as like this last holdover of Soviet-style communism, but actually it's the last holdover of Japanese fascism. And you still see that today. North Koreans are told that they are the purest race on earth and that their superiority means that they need a strong leader to protect them from the outside world. And then they have this leader who's kind of deified because he's a holdover from the Japanese emperor who was actually, a quasi-religious figure. So then in 1991, the Soviet Union collapses. Stopped giving North Korea all these subsidies, and the North Korean government needed to find a new way to keep its citizens' support because they were so poor that they could not feed their own people, and 1 in 10 North Koreans starved to death. So that's when Kim Jong-il, who was the leader at the time, came up with the Sungun policy, military first, which is this big lie they tell the country that they're constantly at this low-boil war with the entire outside world, especially the American imperialist dogs, so you have to give up everything towards the military cause. It's really effective. Everybody buys into it. There are studies that show that even North Koreans who leave the country and see how poor North Korea is, most of them actually come back willingly. When Kim Jong-il died, there were millions of North Koreans crying in the street, and even defectors say that was more real than fake. which is kind of amazing given that the country is really poor and 1% of its population lives in prison camps. And then one effect of this that works really well in the North Korean government's favor is that this militarism also distracts the US and the rest of the outside world. So we're so worried about their nuclear program and their crazy attacks on South Korea that we actually don't bother that much with the way they treat their own people, who are the real victims of the North Korean system.
Every other month or so, it seems like North Korea makes its way into international headlines with military drills and rocket launches. Their rumored possession of nuclear weapons and their proximity to the US and their allies keep political tensions running high. So where did it all begin? How did it escalate to this point? Here's a brief timeline to help you figure it all out. In the early 1960s, North Korea begins its hyper-militarization in response to the Cold War arms race. The USSR offers to help them develop nuclear power, but not weapons. After decades of nuclear development, North Korea consents to signing the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, but denies inspectors access to their nuclear sites. The NPT, signed by 59 other nations, is a step towards nuclear disarmament. A top Pakistani scientist allegedly sells nuclear weapon technology secrets to North Korea. United Nations officials attempt to inspect North Korean nuclear facilities, but are blocked from certain sites. Under suspicion, North Korea threatens to withdraw from the NPT. In exchange for economic and energy support from the US, North Korea signs the Agreed Framework, promising to dismantle its nuclear facilities. North Korea accuses the US of not fulfilling their energy agreement fast enough and threatens to restart their nuclear program. President George W. Bush calls North Korea a part of the axis of evil, and US officials privately accuse North Korea of violating the 1994 agreement. In response, North Korea withdraws from the NPT and declares to the US that it possesses nuclear weapons. North Korea announces they have successfully detonated a nuclear device underground. Seismic readings and radioactive air quality samples support their claim. The UN imposes heavy sanctions on the country. North Korea repeatedly uses their nuclear proliferation as a bargaining tool in exchange for humanitarian aid from the US and UN, but neither side comes to a final agreement. Peace talks are almost at a stalemate, and North Korea continues to test rockets and advance its nuclear proliferation goals. Their increased isolation has given them the nickname the Hermit Kingdom, and international sanctions have crippled their status in the world.
South Korea. I love South Korea. I have buildings in South Korea. I've done jobs in South Korea. It's great. We have right now 28,000 soldiers on the line between North and South. Right? 28,000 soldiers. They pay us peanuts. Peanuts. And every time he acts up from North Korea, he acts up. You know, he has his little fits. Okay? He acts up. And every time he acts up, South Korea says, oh. And we start sending our ships, our planes, or this, or that. Right? They pay us peanuts compared to the cost of this. Now, think of it. And then one of the papers called the other day, and they said, would you speak to the leader of North Korea? I said, absolutely. Why not? Why not? And they come out, Trump would speak to him. Who the hell cares? I'll speak to anybody. Who knows? There's a 10% or a 20% chance that I can talk him out of those damn nukes, because who the hell wants him to have nukes? And there's a chance. I'm only going to make a good deal for us, but there's a chance. But it was like, and Hillary said, he would deal with this dictator. You know, I give me a, oh, you know what? I know they've been doing it a long time, folks. They are rank amateurs, okay? Hillary is a rank amateur. She's been doing it forever, and she still doesn't get it. What the hell is wrong with speaking? And you know what? It's called opening a dialogue. It's opening a dialogue. And I don't say it's going to happen, and probably it won't. But there's nothing. I wouldn't go there. That I can tell you. If he came here, I'd accept him. But I wouldn't give him a state dinner like we do for China and all these other people that rip us off, or we give them these big state dinners. We give them state dinners like you've never seen. We shouldn't have dinners at all. We should be eating a hamburger on a conference table, and we should make better deals with China and others. And forget the state dinners. You forget the state dinners that cost, by the way, a fortune.